Welcome to Business Innovators Radio, featuring industry influencers and trendsetters sharing proven strategies to help you build a better life right now.
You are listening to the Brilliance Business Show, conversations with leading experts in business. And today I have the most wonderful guest who I have interviewed before. I'm happy to call her a friend, and she has the most incredible story. Unstoppable Tracy. Tracy is a #1 international TEDx speaker, and our topic today is Unstop the Story. I wonder what this will be about. Tracy, welcome to the Brilliance Business Show.
Oh, I'm so honored to be on the Brilliance Business Show with Mark Stephen Fuller. How phenomenal to be back together again.
Yes, I'm really looking forward to a conversation with you, Tracy. Before I get started, I just need to make a legal disclaimer that Tracy is not offering legal advice or legal assistance. So let's get started with the show. Unstoppable, I like to call you. Can you share your amazing story, Tracy? Some listeners may not know about your story, and I really want to share your story. It's absolutely incredible.
Oh, Mark, well, thank you. And what your listeners may or may not know about me is that I was born a 4-way amputee, missing my legs above my knees. And I'm missing my left arm, and I'm missing my right hand. And, on top of that being something that there's no visual cue with a podcast, also a World Cup sailor and an advanced scuba diver and somebody that busted Uber into Canada and helped bankruptcy and mergers with the airline industry. So there's a lot of phenomenal things. First 4-way amputee to climb the Himalayas, right? So I like to be perspective. We are all so much more than one piece of our puzzle. And so one piece of my puzzle is that I was born a 4-way amputee. And I think I'm so lucky that I got to be born limitless. And I spell limitless with a B, L-I-M-B, because I was born limitless. But, and so that's a secret. What happened is I was born limitless. But a bigger secret is all of your listeners, along with my comrade, fabulous Mark Stephen Fuller, we were all born limitless too. Our brilliance is limitless in this business world. And I got to learn that really early in life because of being born with a disability.
Yes, and you are so positive and you are happy that things have turned out this way for you. But Tracy, you have been through challenging times. Let's be honest about that. I was bullied at school. I know how hard that is, especially as a young child going through primary school, being bullied about the way you look, or my sexuality, before I even knew my own sexuality.
Yeah.
You looked different to younger children, and before I got to know you, I saw your TEDx speech, and it was called, this is how rememberable it is, I haven't researched this, but I remember the title, and it's something along the lines of "And the Principal Says." Am I correct?
Mm-hmm. And the principle says, it's true,
Yes.
It's about a principle,
Yes.
Nobody left behind. Yes.
And that speech, one, it really made me emotional. It brought emotion. But two, I want people to know what an incredible speaker you are, because your delivery of the speech, your timing, your pauses, the emotion. Now, I know when you're sharing a personal story, sometimes it's hard to hold that emotion back, but you did such a beautiful job, and you have earned your title of a #1 international TEDx speaker. You are phenomenal, and you deserve that because you are a great speaker. But you have been through challenging times. But that story of Anne the Principal Says is beautiful. Please, please, can you share it for us?
Oh, it would be my pleasure. I'm so humbled by your beautiful feedback. And it certainly shaped who I am today, right through to every roadblock my entire life. And it was that first day of school, right? And we were all told no. And a lot of us are underestimated and have naysayers in our lives, like we're too young, or lesbian, bi, gay, trans, queer, plus, or that's for girls, or that's for boys, or you're too tall, or you're too small, or Black Lives Matter, right? Black or white. A lot of us are being underestimated. And so hear yourselves in this story. This is my story, but you know, Mark, you probably empathize because you felt it, like for real. And so invite yourselves into my story. And for me, my biggest no was the first day of school. And I remember being face to face with the principal, and my mom's holding my hand, and we're standing there, and the principal says, he takes a look at me and he says, "I'm sorry, Tracy can't go to this school." And I know that your listeners are the kind of people that are being like, what do you mean, right? I think your world would all stand up and say, of course she gets to go to that school, right? And I fully expected my mom to be all mama bear. But, you know, right now as I'm telling you this, I said that line, I'm sorry, Tracy can't go to this school. And I'm rambling, but my stomach is in upside down right now, and my hair on my arms, and I got goosebumps. Like I just feel a little bit ill because my brain goes right back to hearing the principal say that, even all these years later, was devastating. And so my mom, I thought she was going to be like, what do you mean? Like your listeners, but she wasn't. She smiled and she went eye to eye with the principal. And in the kindest voice tone I have ever heard her use, she just said, how come? And so I know now as a leadership developer, like it's so great that she said, how come? Right? She didn't say why, because why is a trigger word. It puts people on defense. So she just very politely and innocently said, oh, how come? And because the principal wasn't defensive, he was more than happy to explain. And he said, well, you know, it's the 70s and we've only got one teacher and 35-year-old kids. And, you know, with Tracy, without her hands and without her legs, she probably can't tie her shoelaces by herself. And there's one teacher and 35-year-olds. And because Tracy doesn't have her legs, she probably can't go to the washroom by herself. And so with this one teacher, she can't leave or abandon all these other kids. In the 70s, there's no educational assistants or support workers or teacher aides. What do you call it in the United Kingdom, Mark?
Kindergarten is primary school here.
Primary school. Yeah, so primary school. So same thing, just different titles, and there weren't helpers. And so I'm beginning to understand how come the principal said no. So my mom says that. She says, I totally understand. And then she counteroffers. And she says, how about we try Tracy for 1 week since we're here today? And that will give me enough time to try to find another school more suited for Tracy. And if it doesn't work out, no problem. We'll go to the other school on Friday. But can we just try?
Good old mom.
Good old mom, right? Good old Liverpudlian mom, by the way, for all my British listeners around the world. So she has that tough love, hard knock love, suck it up buttercup kind of mom that I've got with my Liverpudlian mom. And so she says, thank you very much. And mom and I walk around to the primary school door, which is a different side of the building. And it's right near the playground where all the kids are playing. And I'm anxious. I want to go play with my friends in the playground. But my mom, she looks out at the playground, and then she gets the same look that the principal had. She gets this look of terror on her face, and her eyes go big as saucers, and she just collapsed to her knees in front of everybody on the cement. And my mom, she grabs my arm, you know, that parental grip where they do the super 5-finger hold on both arms. And I tell you, Mark, right now, I have a sore spot in my left stump because I can feel my mom gripping my arm so tightly right now. So just imagine, my mom is on her knees on the cement, holding 5-finger grip, both arms, super tight. And she's looking me eye to eye. And I'm 5 years old. I have no idea why my mom is on her knees in front of the whole school. What, of course, I'm not realizing is that she's looking me eye to eye. Right? I'm short. I'm 5 years old. She's on her knees. So just like with the principal, eye to eye, she's looking me eye to eye. And so with this super grip, eye to eye on her knees, she says to me, Tracy, it is really important that you, my dear, and everybody is included. Nobody left behind, including you. Well, I'm 5 years old, right? I have no idea why my mom is so intense. I just shake it off and I'm like, okay, mom. I don't realize that if I don't get outside for recess, I don't get to stay at that school. I go to run off into the playground and I look up. The principal had heard the whole thing. His eyes are all welled up with tears. And he's looking at me and he's like, he heard my mom say nobody left behind and holding my arms and being eye to eye. So he is now like super keen on having me stay in this school. He cannot imagine facing my mom on Friday and kicking me out of there. So fast forward in time, do a time warp to recess time. And the principal's so excited, he runs outside to try to see if I made it. Because if I'm outside, I can stay at that school. I'm not there. He's so concerned. And then he shakes his head. He's like, it's her first day. She just needs some time to tie her shoelaces. So 5 minutes go by, and he's looking for me. 10 minutes go by. I'm still not there. 15 minutes go by. The recess bell goes off. I never made it outside. It means I can't stay at that school. The principal is thinking, what am I going to tell Tracy's mom? How am I going to explain this? So he runs inside to find my teacher to find out what happened. And he asks her, he says, couldn't Tracy tie her shoelaces? And she's all confused. And she says, actually, Tracy was the first one to tie her shoelaces. He's like, well, then how come Tracy wasn't outside? And she says, oh, well, her little friend couldn't tie her shoelaces. So it turns out none of the 30 kids could tie their shoelaces. So, Mark, you remember, what did my mom say?
Remind me, it's just such a touching story, Tracy.
Oh, you're so absorbed. You're so amazing. She said, nobody left behind.
Nobody left behind. Tracy, that gets me emotional every time. I'm sure our listeners will really take something from that story. And it just goes to show you should never, ever judge a book by its cover, and you should give everyone a fair opportunity at what they want to do in life. But also, your mum has really given you great values and really, really helped you through that situation, because with the wrong approach, that could have really ruined your chances of even being given that chance. But once you was given that chance, you run with it and made it happen. So I just had to make you share that story today, Tracy. It's absolutely wonderful.
And sometimes people feel like, I don't have a disability, or that's a lovely childhood story. But that no, I learned that day that no and O just means KNOW. So all of you that are trying to figure out reinvention or how to be influential and persuasive with a promotion or a sponsor or gathering funds or, acquiring a customer or building a relationship with a client, right? No, N-O just means KNOW. They just don't know, right? That principal never said no again. But the real magic in that was that my mom didn't counteroffer she can tie her shoelaces. Because when she asked him how come, it wasn't that I couldn't tie my shoelaces. It was that he was worried about being stuck with me. So when she counteroffered, she just said, if it doesn't work out, no problem. So when you're asking how come, it's to really listen and counteroffer what is their struggle. Not I can tie my shoelaces, but that if it doesn't work out, no problem. And so that was the breakthrough. That's how we got in the door that day.
And you have so many great stories and words of wisdom that will really help people, support people. And you really have walked that walk and talked that talk that you can give people these real tips of guidance. And now you have gone on to achieve so much more than you probably ever thought possible. And a lot more than people probably ever thought was possible for you as well, which is totally incredible. I really hold my hat off to you. Could you just share a few words of what you do in business, Tracy?
Yes. Well, because I became the no and O means KNOW girl that day, Uber brought me in when they were trying to break into Canada. I was doing a keynote speech and busting barriers and disarming limiting beliefs because the day was, I'm forgetting the fancy name for it, but the intention is that they bust up what you know about it. It's a reinvention, and it was long before COVID. And so they were bringing in Uber, and they were bringing in the housing app where people share their living quarters for money every now and then. and they were going to bust it up and reinvent it, which is great. Crush what you know for something even bigger and better. So they brought me in for their mindset that day, and I'm in a lineup registering, coming into the conference at this great big Metro Toronto Convention Center. It's a massive hall where huge events are held. And this man is in front of me, and nobody's talking, and that drives me crazy. You know, you can never get off an elevator without me knowing your name. And so I'm in this lineup. I'm like, hi, I'm Tracy. You know, how come you're here today? And so they was, oh, hi, I'm Jared. I'm with Uber. I'm saying, oh, you're with Uber. That's fabulous. And so I've been watching a lot in the newspaper about busing into Canada. And I said, what's your role today? And he said, well, we've sponsored this reinvention event, and they're going to bust up our platform. But I'm kind of sad to say we're on our last legs. You know, we have had many rounds with the government, and we only have one more meeting to bust Uber into Canada. But Canada, we're all around the world in countries you wouldn't even imagine has Uber. He said, but Canada has been sort of one of our last hold strongs to legally get in. The taxi industry is very strong. And I said, oh, tell me more about that. How come? Right? And so they ended up hiring me as a consultant. And I went down to City Hall and advocated with Uber. Like, so without Uber, you don't get Uber Assist or Uber Wave, wheelchair accessible vehicles. And so without Uber, you don't get this incredible opportunity for one of our biggest barriers, which is transportation. And that's true in the UK and the US and Australia, around the world. Transportation is one of the number one barriers for people getting out and about. And so Uber crushes the financial barrier, it crushes the social economic barrier, it crushes safety barriers, and it crushes barriers for people with disabilities as well because of Uber Assist and Uber Wave, wheelchair accessible vehicle. So I advocated this with City Hall, and taxi drivers were spitting and throwing things at me because in their mind, judging a book by the cover, if Uber comes in, that they lose income. And they do in a roundabout way, but their structure was a medallion system. And I think it's similar in UK that there's a license. And so many taxis can have it. Well, in the 70s, there was like 100 of them. And it was the only industry that had grandfathered this licensing system. So there was a real monopoly on who had taxi medallions. And no other industry, flower shops, grocery stores, banks, no one else could grandfather their license for a business to their child, to the next generation, or sell it. And so this was the 70s, and now we're talking in the 2000s, and they had this monopoly on the licensing system. So the real expensive part of running a taxi was this medallion system. And so judging a book by the cover, you think, okay, Uber comes, we're not going to be able to afford our taxi business. But the real bankruptcy was this antiquated, corrupt medallion system. And so because I was able to bust barriers and open up No and a K and OW for the transportation world in the accessibility side of things, it caused a deeper analysis into, so what are the expenses for the taxis? What can the City of Toronto do to minimize some of these costs so that we can have both systems? And it turns out there was this corrupt medallion system. And when we got rid of that, well, taxis could be more than competitive pricing with the Uber world. And taxis were still spending 2 weeks, 14 days on learning how to read a Pearlies, which is a map book. Well, who's using Pearly map books anymore? Right? Everybody's on their apps for Google Maps, right? To find places of where to go. And so it was antiquated. 2 weeks of training, which is very expensive for something they don't even use, but nobody had pushed them to update. So the map system, the licensing system. So the real bankruptcy was not Uber coming. It was some of these old systems in the taxi world. So that's what I do with businesses is I don't have those solutions. I don't know the taxi business. I don't know Uber, but I come in and I ask, how come? And I help people look at what are you doing now and what would you like to do? And I look at those performance gaps and then I ask them, what's it going to take to overcome those gaps? And they always say it's impossible. And so then I share my stories of being a World Cup sailor and an alpine downhill skier and that I fly airplanes. And they realize that impossible is not impossible. And then with the mind shift, we say impossible unless. And I learned that from Dr. Alan Bernard. He's a behavior scientist and a millionaire, I believe, and a deep philosopher and psychologist with tons and tons of PhDs. And he talks about impossible unless in a business way. And so I can give you lots of business stories about how impossible unless breaks through. But that's kind of how I take my athletic, adventurer, humanitarian world and bring it into business.
And I have been all over Canada in Toronto area, and Uber is absolutely everywhere. I was using it myself, so you did a great job there, Tracy.
And not alone.
And
I help generate the conversation impossible unless.
Yes, I get it. And you really are that person that can show people that nothing is impossible. Now, we have been in a lockdown, haven't we? And it's been a terrible year. I've had a great year in business, but I have literally been in this spot now since March. So I'll be glad when events start next year. Just quickly, how have you found the lockdown and how has it affected you, Tracy?
You know, I feel... So right in March, there was a day, it was lockdown and conversation.
I was due to come to Toronto in March to the Grant Cardone event that got cancelled.
Right? So that's exactly what happened in March, right? So there was a lot of conversations, but March was a real moment of truth, lockdown with flights in an extreme way. You were supposed to come and I would have seen you in face to face. And at the time I was in British Columbia. In 2020, I'd already been to 20 cities in Europe and North America. But by March, and I was in Canada, but British Columbia, which is as far away as United Kingdom for me, the other way from Toronto. It might as well have been in United Kingdom. Canada's so big. And on that day, 24 of my large scale events canceled within 24 hours, which was my upcoming business year, essentially. And I had just bought I finally had confidence from 2017 to 2020 that I was able to upscale. So I have bought a new car. I bought this new couch. I bought a new bed. I bought a new fancy condo facing High Park, one of the nicest areas in Toronto, a very exclusive, beautiful neighborhood. And I had bought a condo that I'm in right now in this neighborhood. And then 24 events had completely canceled. And I had, mega expenses in all of these purchases that I had all bought in the same month. The new car, the new couch, the new condo, like all of it, all in the same month. So it was scary. To say the least. And because of that fear, I think myself and a lot of people, they pulled in, they turtled. Instead, when what you need to do is you need to put your head out and look, but they turtled. And so what we really needed was people like myself instilling courage and disarming limiting beliefs that this is a lockdown, and supporting folks that when you don't know how to take steps forward. And these were all my specialties: exceeding uncertainty, embracing possibility when you have no idea how, earning independence with things you've never done before, right? And this was my forte. And it was a time that people were not spending any money to be able to do that. And of course I did it for many to out of my heart to be able to support folks at that time. But what happened with a very low, scary summer of March, April, May, June, July, August, but by August, people were getting to the extreme. They were seeing in their staff and in their neighbors and in their children and in their communities and in their businesses, fat, what I call fat, F-A-T. They were seeing a lot of fear, a lot of anxiety, and a lot of tension, F-A-T, fear, anxiety, and tension. And they started to realize the value of how do we reinstill confidence? How do we help people exceed their uncertainties? How do we boost morale with the power of positivity, right? How do we face resiliency and build that resiliency and that perseverance back in on this roller coaster? And so business just went trifold and has been exceptionally busy since the end of August. And momentum is no less. November has been at least 5 deliverables a day. But because of what was happening in my business, one of my reinventions was a podcast. And so my November is like lots of stages, plus I'm trying to learn on my learning curve, launching a podcast. So November has been all day, all night. I'm getting about 2 hours sleep in November, but it's like full on, go for it. And I know you need balance, all you wellness people out there, but you also need to have drive and you need to make it happen. And it's not a magic wand, right? You don't wish it and it happens. You wish it, you believe you can do it for real, whether you know how to or not. But the magic nugget is, and then you do whatever it takes to make it happen.
It's been hard for many, many people, and that must have been so scary for you, having just bought a new condo. But you are the perfect person to help lift people's spirits, get people back in the right frame of mind. I can see when events start again as well, you are going to be the perfect person to open these events, because you can really support businesses to really get back on track as well. Now, you've touched on this. We're coming up to the last 5 minutes now, Tracy. The topic of our show today on Stop the Story, your new podcast. Tell us all about it. What is the podcast about, and what can we look forward to?
Well, and we heard it in the kindergarten story with the principal, and we heard it with the Uber world, and we heard it with the city staff and taxi drivers. Is, you know, as people, we sometimes have this story in our heads of what we tell ourselves. I'm too small, or I don't have enough education, or I don't have enough experience, or I don't know how. And what's interesting is that organizations and businesses, they have these stories too, right? We all have these stories, whether we're a big business or a 5-year-old girl being told no in kindergarten. We all have these stories in our heads, and we need to unstop that story, right? A 5-year-old girl, I learned, you know, how come the only girl with no hands was the only student required to be able to tie their shoelaces? And it kind of makes sense. Even to me, it made sense that day. And so we have these standard operating procedures that say we must do it this way, or you must have this education, or you must be this tall to play basketball, or you must have this much exposure before you could be a famous singer. You know, whatever your passion is, whatever your age is, whatever your sex preference is, whatever your skin color is, or whether you have a disability or not, right? I learned that day, I just wanted to play in the playground. You just want to play in the playground of business. What I didn't know that day, that I was going to be the shoelace leader of 30 kids. I didn't know I was going to grow up to be this year's Canada Hall of Famer in all of Canada, next to Wayne Gretzky and past prime ministers for humanitarian work, right? I didn't know I would be #1 transformational leader out of 160 countries, right? There were 9,000 people that would have won this woman transformational leader with leadership guru John Maxwell. And it was me, right? So we unstop the story. And we have stories we tell ourselves. Businesses have stories they tell themselves, standard operating procedures. Unstop the story and disarm your limiting beliefs, and you will live a limitless life.
I love it. So when does your podcast launch, and how can our listeners get involved and come and listen to your amazing podcast?
Oh, thank you for asking. It's around the corner, December 3rd. December 3rd is the launch day, and we'll put 3 out. And I have guests like Make-A-Wish Foundation founder and TV celebrity in Canada, and Dr. Alan Bernard, the behavior scientist of Impossible Unless. He's one of my guests, and he goes into some deep business stories and behavior science that's behind why people stop and reframe that you can leverage for yourself. Like, there's great guests. So I hope you go to unstoppabletracy.com/launch. And please be my early bird launch team. And I will share some extra bonuses. Like I'll give you a free download of my book. I'll give you the full Zoom where you can see people's faces for the podcast. And the bonus would be if you would listen and like on December 3rd and share. So unstoppabletracy.com/launch, and you can be part of my early bird launch team.
Thank you so much. Share that website address once more. unstoppabletracy.com/launch.
.com/launch.
Share it once more so we're clear.
Unstoppable is so unstoppable. There's 2 P's. And I have no hands and no legs, and I do not have an E in my name. No extra parts on my body or my name. TRACY. Unstoppable Tracy, all one word, .com. And then /launch. I'm working on my website to not have to do the /launch, just so you could see launch or see podcast and just pick it. But today, if you go there today, you might still need to do the invisible hidden screen for the special bonuses. unstoppabletracy.com /launch to be part of my early bird launch team with the gifts.
Tracy, you have been such an incredible guest. I'd urge all of our listeners to start listening to Unstop the Story podcast. It's going to be absolutely incredible. You will know that just from listening to Tracy's story, how she is, and her amazing tips, guidance and support for business. Tracy, I have really enjoyed having a conversation with you today.
Thank you. And you must keep listening to this podcast because mine's only 10 podcasts for the 10 chapters. So forevermore, I need that lifeline in Mark Stephen Pooler. So all of you need to keep listening to this podcast too.
Tracy, it's been an absolute pleasure. And whenever you want my support, you always have it.
Such a lifeline. For me and so many out there, we are all very lucky. Thank you.
It's been my pleasure. You have been listening to the Brilliance Business Show. Conversations with leading experts in business.
Thanks for listening to Business Innovators Radio. To hear all episodes featuring leading industry influencers and trendsetters, visit us online at businessinnovatorsradio.com today.